Now, why do you think that it's so easy to shift from what Solomon starts off doing is this is about the country to this is about me, because it is such a common story. It bears thinking about why is it so common.
It goes back to the garden where we have to keep it, and that means everything. So if my attitude and my choices have to constantly be in alignment with what is good, that's a daily choice. Every moment of every day, day in and day out. If I don't choose correctly, I've chosen the wrong thing. And so it's being told to work it and keep it and maintain it. If a snake comes in and I say it's not a big deal, then I've made a step towards bad. And eventually it happens. Could be today, could be tomorrow, could be in a month, whatever. But I think that's just the way it is. If someone is protecting his house, he doesn't say, well, I'll get to it tomorrow. He has to always be on guard.
I think it's also the, obtaining success for the first time and the motivations and the deeds that go into that is different than maintaining a success. Because while you're in pursuit of something, there's just a different mentality than if you already have it. I think of how they evaluate football players for the NFL right now, and one of the big things they talk about is not skill and things of a sort, but they're really high on character because they want guys who, once they've ascended to the NFL and once they're going to get this big paycheck, are the sort who are still going to work hard. Because so often, many college athletes make that transition and that's it. They get that paycheck and they're done.
Yeah, I think that it goes back to the garden, like you were saying, and the fact that when Adam and Eve chose to be their own God, to put themselves at the top of the hierarchy, I think that now is part of our human nature, and it seems like we have a very difficult time maintaining for any amount of time a focus that's anywhere other than ourselves. And it's interesting that blessings seem to be one of the hardest things to overcome, that they have a tendency to lead us to thinking more about ourselves. When Jesus says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. It's, once we're blessed to a certain extent, well, we just want to think about that and not think about anything else.
I seem to recall you talking about I believe it was the Puritans and how they recognized that if you follow God's law, His word, that it often breeds material success, and how that material success often also then leads to kind of a spiritual decline.
Yeah.
And how they recognize this, and yet,
Yeah, they recognized it, and they really kind of lamented over the fact that they couldn't figure out a way around it. That seemed to be always true, and you think about it, it's funny that this should persist through all the centuries, because you look at our life now and you think, okay, well, if I'm rich, there's so many things I'm shielded from. There's so many things I can do. I can travel around the world. I can go see all the sights. I can stay in luxury. Travel doesn't have to mean hardship as it did in most times. And you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so much now. And then you think about anywhere from like the 1700s back to Jesus' day, being wealthy meant you had food, you had a place to live. You know what I'm saying? Like wealth got you so much less then than it does now. And yet it was enough. It was enough to derail them. And so it really is kind of a fascinating thing that we really seem to have a hard time dealing with being blessed. And so maybe we shouldn't be so quick to want blessings so badly. So one of the things that this brings out, and we see this throughout the divided kingdom, is that throughout the divided kingdom, we have now two different kingdoms that are supposed to pursue God's original plan, which is that He would have a relationship with them, they would be obedient to Him, and the nations would see the blessings that come on them and want to follow God. That they would be the priests to the nations. How did that turn out? Having two.
most of the time not so well.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the northern kingdom, out of the 20 kings that they had, we have 0 good kings. All of them are pursuing themselves and glory for themselves, introducing idol worship. Out of the 20 kings in the south, we have about 8 good ones. And when we say good, that's pretty
Less
Bar's
evil.
low.
yes, yeah. The bar's not set too high there, and a lot of them were good for part of their lives, but not the whole thing. So, what are we to learn from this episode in history? Because this is a weird thing, and when people read the Bible, I think that it's often true that we read the Bible, we don't know what to make out of this. Like most of the stories don't have happy endings, and this is certainly one of those because this is going to end in both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom being taken into captivity. What are we to learn from this?
I once heard somebody put it, and they were doing a survey and asking, like, what's the best form of government? And, and obviously, people from the West are like democracy and a republic and you get other, but their answer was a benevolent monarchy. And that ultimately means to have a good king who's all powerful, can pass the laws that should be passed, but is benevolent and has the people's best heart in mind. And I think we look at all these litany of kings who most were bad and some, even their measure of good was not great. And it leaves us wanting a better king. And it leaves us wanting a better kingdom as well. And I think it places in us an eternal longing for something that was just not going to be fulfilled on earth with these earthly kings.
No human king will satisfy completely. We'll always want something more.
I think that what we see here is that to look for our salvation in this is really quite foolish.
Yeah.
To look to earthly kingdoms, earthly kings, to look to the political process, to look to democracy. Obviously, the point of these stories is that we need something other than a material king, a physical king. We need something other than an earthly king. And what these stories are preparing Israel for is to see something, to look for something different, to look for salvation in a different place. Now the irony of it is that when Jesus comes, they're going to say, "Well, you're not the earthly king we're looking for," and so they don't learn the lesson. So hopefully, as we as Christians.
Well, not all of them,
Right.
but a lot of them did too, right? I mean, at least a smaller group, they actually saw and accepted, and so.
Well, eventually,
Yeah,
but
true.
even when Jesus was on the earth, his disciples still were looking for, wondering why he wasn't
Indeed.
doing those things. But the thing is that we should learn the lesson here and not make the same mistakes.
Indeed.
Because it's one thing to say, well, the Israelites were kind of silly in the fact that they couldn't learn the lesson, even though it was drawn out over a couple thousand years. But when the lesson's already passed and the answer's already put on paper, and all you have to do is look at it and read it, we definitely shouldn't make the same mistake that they did.